Hello, this is Elisa Kohler, and we're going to go way back in time and look at some of the early music that was written back in the ancient world before the musical notation system that we're learning in our Fundamentals of Music Theory class, just so you have some sense of what came before. In ancient Babylon, we have artwork and literature that refers to music. You can see here we have the harp players, and here it's kind of hard to see. There's someone playing an aulos or an early flute or woodwind instrument here, the harpists here. How you march and play the harp, I'm not going to worry about that right now. But in ancient Egypt, just to give you some perspective, we have King Tut and King Ramses, who was pharaoh during the book of Exodus, just to give you some historical perspective. And in ancient Egypt, once again, there were hieroglyphics and lots of artwork, and there was discussion of music being soothing and some of the instruments that they may have used, harps and lutes and lyres and flutes, but we don't have any music that was written down. Similarly, in ancient Israel, King David is often reputed to have composed many of the Psalms from the Hebrew Bible, and the Psalms are literally a songbook as well as for prayer. And there were some instruments mentioned, and there was some shorthand music notation symbols like vocal inflection written above some of the text. And here are some of the terms that are used in the Psalms, which are almost like performance directions. Selah meant pause. We don't know whether there was some dancing or some movement between some of the verses or some of the sections of written psalms. Mitkam meant in a quiet voice. And here's one of the most interesting things. There were actually names of popular tunes from the ancient world that were meant to be sung to the words of the psalms. And this is something that survives in the United States of America today, because our national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, was originally a tune that was an English drinking song, To Anacreon in Heaven, and the words are, of course, by Francis Scott Key. And some of the instruments mentioned are harps and wind instruments, flutes, some cymbals too. Now, in ancient Greece, it gets very interesting because we have lots of literature, poetry, and philosophy written about the meaning of music. In fact, the word music itself comes from the Muses here, who were the 9 mythological daughters of Zeus. And we will look at a list of them briefly in just a moment. But when you think of music that's good for you or music that's bad for you culturally, that comes from a lot of literature from ancient Greece, where the Greek god Apollo was the good musician playing the harp or the kithara, and then the party music, the god of wine Dionysus would play the pipes or the aulos. And it's also interesting to note that Homer's great works, the Iliad and the Odyssey, were meant to be recited almost as if they were sung or chanted. And just to show you what a kithara looks like, here we have a picture of a Greek bard playing one. Notice he's got a pick there. And here are the names of the muses. And you'll notice that very few of them actually are related to music. We have Euterpe here, who's allegedly with music. And then you can see that we have Terpsichore, who's known as the muse of dance, but also the muse of choral song. Lots of choruses sang as well as danced. And you can see how many are related to poetry. Lyric poetry, love poetry, sacred poetry. And if you think back to Shakespeare's plays, are they not put into the 3 categories of history, tragedy, and comedy? Interesting to see where a lot of these things come from. And here's something very pertinent to what we're talking about in relation to music notation in the ancient world. This is a picture of an ancient Greek music school, and you can see that our student here, Dimitri, maybe, is trying to sing or recite something on this scroll that the teacher's holding. We can't see what's here, but maybe there's some clue to music notation here. And then on the other side, we have a student playing the kithara or the harp. His teacher is instructing him with the time-honored oral tradition method of the master teaching the student without reading sheet music. And I don't know about him, maybe he's trying to keep people from cutting class. In ancient Rome, things were similar to ancient Greece, but the military spectacle was a big part of music in ancient Rome. There were lots of brass instruments, lots of loud instruments, and music was a symbol of power and wealth. And here's a little picture to give you a sense of that. Here two gladiators hacking each other to death to the accompaniment of a trumpet. The picture is cut off here. A water organ or a hydraulic organ, and two musicians playing the cornu, which is like a very small shape of a sousaphone, but it's more like a French horn. Now here's something very interesting. If we look carefully above this Greek text here, these are some of what scholars have recently discovered are these inflection symbols over the text, which would indicate whether the pitch would rise or fall, or perhaps be long or played in quick succession. So here's what some scholars have decoded these symbols to mean. Looks a little bit like an eye chart, doesn't it? But it's very interesting to see where some of the research is moving in this direction. This is another chart that shows you some of the microtones, which are the spaces between half steps that would be notated with some of these old symbols here. We'll just breeze over this, just wanted to show it to you quickly. And where did this lead? Well, when we get into early chant notation, you'll see the Latin text here, see the word resurrexit and alleluia here, and all of these symbols are similar to the ancient Greek inflection symbols. You would have a reciting tone where everyone would start from the same pitch, and then these symbols here would show you whether the notes go up or down, and there's a bit more to it. But you'll notice we just have these symbols, but we don't have music lines. And here's another example that chant became much busier. Wow, I don't know how you would read that. You can see very small word alleluia here and alleluia. Wow, that's what that notation would be telling you in an approximate way. So musicians wanted to make things clearer by adding lines to tame a lot of these symbols, and we have early chant notation known as neumes. That's what these symbols are. This is an early bass clef showing you that line there. And then if we were to read this in modern notation, it would look a bit more like this. Notice that we don't have the familiar rhythmic symbols or time signatures, but this just shows us where pitches rise and fall. So just briefly, this is what happened after the music in the ancient world. We have these imprecise inflection symbols here that we're talking about. We got the note names from the alphabet thanks to Boethius. And then Pope St. Gregory the Great, for whom Gregorian chant is named, created this symbol. Well, he didn't create it. He wanted it to, he actually decreed that it should be written down and set the whole process in motion. Then we have neumes changing their shapes, and everything changed in the Renaissance with the printing press, and that's when we started to have more time signatures, rhythmic notation that we're familiar with today. And then we have functional harmony in the early 17th century, and copyright laws and European publishers becoming much more regimented in the 19th century and then on up through today. But this just gives you a quick view of how things changed from music in the ancient world to the development of the music notation that we use today.